Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to read another fanfic found on your boyfriend fanfic found on Archive of Your Own, Snowed In by FrostbittenRoses. Summary: an unexpected cold front has brought a heavy snowstorm upon the city that YN lives in, blanking the streets in snow and leaving the residents in a seemingly never-ending expanse of frigid cold. However odd the cold may be, it surely can't be any different from the winters that other places may have, right? Not like anything works in the snowy fog, right? And this, it's a AU, and Peter is a monster. Chapter 1, Pilot. Life in the big city has always been something that was quite simple to YN. Wake up, have some coffee. That'll be left ready by their roommate. Head to work at the diner, where they'll end up doing double shifts just to assure their rent was paid every month. Come home exhausted and eat, then head straight to bed to repeat the day. Maybe they'll sneak in some relaxation time when they're with their roommate if they were utterly done for the day. It was a repeating process that made up their everyday life, save for the days that they had off, but it was a progress that they had grown accustomed to and comfortable with. However, the world doesn't always like it when someone is content with their lives. So it likes to throw vents in the lives of people that are happy to wake them up. It may have overestimated how much disaster it wanted to unleash to disrupt the peace. For the world wouldn't be the same because of fate's design. It happened near the beginning of winter, where a cold front of extremely low temperatures was reported to be approaching in the coming weeks. It had been said to have appeared out of nowhere, and given the fact that the city that YN lived in was within the more southern areas of this country, they and the other residents were not all too concerned when it came to the supposed extreme cold. Their collective arrogance resulted in their lack of preparation for when the cold really did arrive. It was truly the coldest start of the winter that the city and its residents had ever experienced. A frigid temperature that brought along an early flurry of snow that sent families into stores to assure that they had a perfect clothing for the sudden change in weather. They could not predict that it was only going to get worse from here on out. Weeks passed since the snow first arrived, yet it refused to let up for even a minute. A constant snowstorm kept a white blanket over the entire city that constantly froze engines to vehicles and ensured snow plows could not be used to clear the roads. The residents were essentially trapped within their own homes, left to pray that their heaters would be able to last for the cold and keep them warm. City council would go as far as to contact a neighboring city for assistance on the roads. However, they reported that they were going for the same issues, that they were nothing and no one was going to be able to get in or out of the city as long as the snow stayed upon the roads. Though the inability to plow the snow surely meant it would be staying for longer than wanted. As for YN, They could be found in their shared apartment, sitting on the couch, curled up in the warm blankets, and carefully blowing warm air into their hands, using their breath as they allowed the rotating heater they had brought months ago to warm up the living room. Their roommate Lucy had agreed that that had been a good idea to go do so, given the fact that the air conditioning would sometimes get faulty and blew out too much cold air when it wasn't necessary. Now they certainly weren't regretting it, making this decision at all. The heater was a lifesaver. Well, that may have been exaggerating just a bit. Lucy stayed as she stepped out of her room, with a sigh as she entered the kitchen, grabbing all the necessary things to make both of them some hot chocolate to keep them nice and warm. She wasn't dressed in her usual attire that she'd have before the winter came. Instead, she was wearing a purple and lavender striped sweater, alongside a purple beanie that she found to be cute. She peered over her roommate, who was still seated over on the couch and doing their best to stay warm, furrowing her eyebrows as she walked back over to the package she was using to prepare them both some hot chocolate. With the sudden snowstorm, their landlord had become more lenient when it came to the matter of rent, since he understood that there was no way that Wyan could go to work under these conditions. Lucy found relief with that fact, since it allowed her to spend more time with her roommate and actually bond with them. She never truly got the opportunity to when they were always stuck working back before the snow hit the city. So she believed it was one of the few good things aside when it came to this dreadful weather. Wyan, on the other hand, didn't see the snowstorm to be sort of blessing at all. Their inability to go out and work, only served as added extra dose of anxiety on top of the worry that came with the possibility that the snow would not be leaving anytime soon, leaving them with a healthy serving of panic that they did not ask for. They were honestly quite surprised that they hadn't gone and turned into a Hawaiian icicle the first time they had gone out to go get groceries during the winter, especially when the snow managed to seep into their boots because of how high it was outside. They shuddered at the thought as they looked over to their snow boots by the door and their socks that they had to let air dry. Truly never a more uncomfortable feeling than wet socks. They're at least been able to keep in contact with their coworker TK over the last few weeks. They had always been painfully obvious that they had a crush on Ryan for a while now, but they hadn't been able to figure out whether or not that they really replicate this feeling. They don't want to break their sweet heart. They're a great friend, but that's the issue. They never really thought of TK as anything more than a friend or a sibling to them. But that's neither here nor there. At the moment, right now, they're distracting each other enough by sending messages back and forth, complaining about the terrible weather, making predictions as when it will end or if the world will end first. Talking about any shows they've been binging on their streaming devices. TK made a bet a few days ago that they would be able to watch more episodes of a certain series they found. One that Wyan had found equally interesting enough to actually accept the challenge. Right now, they're both of them are tied. They're giggling to themselves because of a joke that TK had sent them when Lucy taps them on the shoulder, causing them to jump ever so slightly from the surprise. "Lulu!" they cry out as their roommate chuckles and takes a seat at the spot beside them. You gave me a freaking heart attack." She shakes her head with a sigh, a smug smirk plastered on her face as she responds, sorry I interrupted your convo, sweet, but I wanted to let you know that I made some hot cocoa for the two of us. She holds up one of the mugs towards YN as a scent of warm chocolate, most definitely alluring, namely the warm aspect. They take it graciously, nodding with a silent thanks as they take a tentative slip from the hot drink, and a pleased hum rises from their throat. It's great, thanks, Lulu, they say with a pure gratitude. No problem, really. I know you hate the cold, after all. They groan as they set the mug down on the coffee table and hold their hands up with their head up with their hands, shaking her head. Hate is definitely an understatement right now. They never had winters this bad. Why now? Is the cold front really that strong this time around? They swung back against the couch and idly tugged the blanket around them tighter for comfort. You could hardly see outside of the windows. A shame, too. I bet it looks really beautiful all covered in white. She sighs as she glances at the closest window. Not that I want to go out there and figure out on my own, though. Way too cold. Just hope they get the plows up and running again, so I could start heading back to work. Maybe they'll keep my mind off this god-awful weather. They chuckle softly at the thought. Imagine TK walking in with a large coat covered with snow was definitely something they wouldn't miss for the world, though they had to imagine that they look like that too. Maybe YN, it's a good thing they're broke for now. Lucy asked for a cheerful approach at the conversation. You always seem so worked up. And well, I like it when you're happy, sweetie. You look so much better smiling, having fun. But well, you're a real sticker because of your work. Well, you understand too. If you actually did work, you know. They asked with a brow raise, though immediately snuck back as they processed what they had just said. Sorry, Lou. That just slipped out. Lucy is seeming taken back by the statement, though soon sighed and nodded as she held up her hand. No, it's all right. I'm probably needed to hear that. Despite her attempt to play the comment off, it's impossible to ignore the sorrow in her tone. Hey, why don't I introduce you to my boss after the whole storm business blows over? Huh? I think you really do great. Plus, we're hiring. They draw out the last word with a smile on their face, gently propping at the road meat. What do you say? There's a moment of silence that Lucy seemed to be taking to actually think about this question, though a smile soon creeps into her face as she nods. Sounds amazing, thank you. Though, might take some time getting used to. Don't have to worry about it. Me and my coworker will teach you what to do. They offered with a gentle smile on their face. Pleased with this response, Lucy checks the time on her phone and frowned. When she realized just how late it had gone, she stood up and walked over to the curtains, drawing them back to peer outside. Frost covered the windows, snow gently patting the window sills, even alongside the corners above. Geez, some winter wonderland, huh? She commented with a grin as she pointed her thumb towards the window, enticing a groan from YN as they slumped onto the couch with their blanket. Winter nightmare, really. This is why I hate the cold, they mumble before pulling the blanket over their head and cooning themselves for warmth. Night, Lulu. Night, hun. Sleep well. Sleep tight, she called to them as she walked into her room, closing the door behind her. YN sighed as they allowed the warmth of the AC blanket and the heater lured them into deep sleep. So, such a deep sleep, in fact, that they hadn't noticed the palm wiping away the frost upon the window in the living room, and the icy blue eyes focused solely on their resting form, all bundled up on the couch. Chapter 2. Malevolent Kindness. Wyann's steps caused the snow to crunch beneath their boots as they progressed forward through the wasteland of cold, an endless white expanse with fog that prevented them from seeing too far ahead of them. They were freezing cold despite the heavy winter attire that they had on, as if their gloves and snow coat would do nothing to prevent their body temperature from plummeting further. They raised their trembling hands up to their face in an attempt to warm them with their breath, but nothing came out. There was no puff of air, and that left them in granted heat to their hands, which likely had something to do with the fact that they were unable to get warmth from the attire they had been wearing. They continued onward through the frigid cold despite all of this, for they had no other option than to do so. Icy wind stabbed at their trembling form through the layers of clothes that they wore. The snow often covering their face and forced them to wipe it off as they tugged along. It was so damn cold that they were beginning to feel a faint sense of hopelessness rising up within them, a feeling that choked their soul in its grip. They hadn't even realized that they'd begun crying until the winds began digging their tears into their cheeks through sheer force, making them realize what was happening. The hopelessness was all that remained in their soul as they lay down upon the snow and began to sob, unsure as to why exactly they were doing so. They squeezed their eyes shut as the winds blew harder upon their form, as if taunting them for their weakness at this moment. It was a horrible feeling, and they just wished that they could be free of it. They'll do anything to be free of it. And at the exact moment the cold suddenly dissipated, there was no longer the icy grip of despair around their heart. Instead, placed by a smoothing warmth that settled upon every inch of their body, it was absolutely blissful. It was as if it was the correct word to describe them. They truly didn't know, nor did they really care. They just yearned to stay within this warmth, not questioning it until they felt gravity shift as they were lifted from the snow. They slowly and carefully opened their eyes, breaking away the snow that had settled on their eyelids. Their tears had blurred their vision, but they could just barely make out icy blue irises that pierced through the fog in a sharp-toothed smile. "Rest, darling," spoke a voice as soft as a whisper, as a figure pressed them against their chest. "It's okay." It was so warm, so perfect. It was hard to stay awake. "I'll be there for you." Wyan woke on their bed with a gasp, and quickly looked around their room with heavy breaths, eyes wide as they threw the sheets off themselves and jumped off the bed. They didn't exactly remember actually getting to bed last night, since they were certain that they had slept on the couch, but perhaps that could be chalked up by Lucy having decided to move them before she went to bed. They had appreciated that. Actually, since they had slept quite peacefully on the bed, though, they still couldn't get the dream out of their head. The blue eyes that graved themselves into their memory, those words that had smoothed them into slumber alongside the warmth. It was odd, to say the least. They shook their head as they took a warm shower and got dressed for the day. Stepping out of the kitchen to grab themselves a cup of coffee that they could already tell was ready and waiting for them on the island, they hummed in delight as they took a quick sip of the coffee. singling in a leaf as they felt their morning exhaustion already slowly slipping away from them. They had often told by their friend TK that they had coffee addiction, to which they responded by saying that they couldn't necessarily survive a day without their morning cup. This rewarded them with a lecture over the dangers of too much, which was not how YN expected to start their workday. It was, however, enough to worry them into cutting back just a bit on how much coffee they were drinking. They were about to go ahead and grab their laptop to get some stuff done for college classes before they stopped by the voice of their roommate calling from her room. "Hey, YN, could you stop by the store real quick and grab us some coffee beans? We're about to run out of them," called Lucy from her room, completely halting YN in her tracks. Normally they will have some sort of complaint about having to go do shopping for Lucy, but in this case it was really shopping for the both of them. Okay, mainly themselves, but could they really do without coffee? No, they could not. "I'll head out right now. I'll be back in a bit," they called from where they stood before they walked into the room and grabbed their coat, gloves, and they walked out the front door to grab their boots that they had left to dry. Right after that was said and done, they grabbed their keys and made their way out of the apartment. They cried out in surprise when they bumped straight into the landlord, his hand still raised up to knock on the door. Their landlord, Don, from what they could remember about their brief conversations, had always been someone Lion had found interesting, to say the least. He was a rather tall man compared to people that they had met or really, could really remember meeting at all. He suddenly incredibly fit, just in appearance, though they doubted he was just all looks and nothing to show for it. He was a intimidating man, gruff by nature, incredibly blunt at times, but they in no way disliked Don in any way. Lucy, on their hand, had more colorful opinions about where Don could stick his stupid frickin' rent money. They had decided to keep any mention of that comment to themselves. "You right, kid?" he asked with a raised eyebrow as he crossed his arms, looking them up and down before speaking again. "Guess I showed up at a bad time." It took them a minute to come up with the words as they wanted to say, but they quickly shook their head. No, you're all right. I was just about to go do some shopping, right? Was there something you wanted to tell me?" The man raised his hand to shake his head in return, sighing, "No, kid, don't worry about it. I was just gonna make sure you and your roommate were doing all right. That nothing was broken or anything. Last thing we need is the AC breaking down again. Well, this is happening." He gestured towards the wall with his thumb as he spoke, which was pretty clear sign of what he meant. They blinked upon hearing this and chuckled softly. "Nothing's broken, thank God. I don't think I'll survive for too long if the AC stopped working, but thankfully we still have our heater to fall back on if we need it. Thanks for asking, though." They offer him a jealous smile alongside their answer, which seems to visibly put him at ease. All right, the corners of his lips curl up slightly in a smile. "Just making sure, of course. You let me know if anything comes up, all right? Last thing I need is any of my tenants turning into ice cubes because they were worried about having to pay for a broken AC right now. I won't." For a moment, they actually worried that they would have to pay if anything came up. So you can imagine the relief that they felt right then. They sighed and nodded. "Of course, Don. You'd be the first person I think about calling. Oh crap! I should be going now. It was nice talking to you. They sped past the man before he could get another word out, leaving him standing there in a silence before he lowered his gaze down to the floor in front of the apartment door. He originally came to warn them about dragging snow from outside since he had to clean some last night. But I suppose it could wait for another time. Wine stepped outside and was immediately hit with the cold like a sucker punch, almost recovering from the sudden shift of temperature from inside and to outside. This is why they wanted to get going, so they wouldn't have to deal with the damn weather for too long. They think whoever had gone out of their way to clear out the sidewalks in their mind as they made their way onward, stopping just a bit away from the entrance to gaze upon the windows that peered in the apartment's living room. They remember when there used to be a tree that sat right next to the building, with branches that reached their bedroom and almost to the living room, but had been cut down about a week after the snow arrived. It was provide an issue with it holding snow on its branches and occasional dropping it onto unsuspecting passersby when the weight of it began to be too much on the branches. This was much to the dismay of Lion, who found the snow upon the tree's branches to be one of the few good things that they liked about winter. They pushed aside the memory and continued onward towards the local supermarket, which they thankfully knew a shortcut that they could use to get there faster. As they had to all they had to do was cut through the park and get a few minutes off of their time it could take to get there, which meant a few minutes less to being out here in the cold. Wine believed this was a blessing. They entered the park and made their way down one of the more obscure paths, a part of the park that they were much more familiar with compared to the most other people that visit the place. It was mostly used by groundskeepers or elderly, so they could feed ducks during the warmer weather. Now, the only people that would see where the city workers cleaned the path every now and then. The obscurity of it was what made it so special to them. It was more of a relaxing spot during the workdays, when it wasn't looking like a snow globe outside. Even with the blanket of snow covering the park, it still managed to ease them into a sense of security and peace. The park always had a fun way of doing it, that to them. They looked at the side for a moment caught a glimpse of something that caught their eye, immediately stopping and walking off to the path to investigate. They were hesitant with stepping into deep snow, but they were able to traverse through it without getting snow in their boots, thanks to some incredibly careful movements. With their eyes glued to the floor, each step calculated, they soon reached the spot where they wanted to get to and rose their gaze upward. The lake, or rather the lake should have been, was completely covered in like a thin layer of snow compared to the rest of the park. The ice that was now upon its surface seemed strong enough to support their weight. As they took a step forward to test it, which offered them an inspiration as to why there were paths seemingly shoveled out through the snow on top of the ice, it was likely that some things had thought it would be a good idea to play risk taker and make paths on the lake to make the illusion that a worker had added a shortcut. They already imagined how that could horribly screw up. Even just the thought caused a shudder to run down their spine. What a cruel prank that would have been. They were so caught up in their thoughts that they hadn't noticed the person who had taken the opportunity to stand beside them. Or at least, that's what they told themselves at the moment. They couldn't imagine that someone could seriously be that quiet with all the snow around them. They seemed to turn to the side when they felt that something or someone was watching them. Their concerns proven correct. They were met face to face with blue eyes and a jealous smile. They took a breath too quick to allow a cry of fear. Instead, began to dissolve into a coughing fit, which turned an expression on the man's face as one of pure concern as he began gently patting them on the back. "Geez, you're real jumpy, huh? I didn't mean to scare you like that. I promise. Are you right?" he asked quickly, as soon as the coughing died down, though still carefully rubbing their back in an attempt to be smoothing. Wyan looked at the man. "Hold on. Looked up? Geez. And they thought Don was tall. This guy had to be at least a head above their landlord." They knew they were rather short for their size, but now they felt that the world was just rubbing in. "Wait, that's not what's important right now." They furrowed their eyebrows as he shuddered the man his hand right off them, clearing their throat after taking a deep and more careful breath. Yeah, I'm all right. You just scared me to freaking death. Man, what are you thinking?" Their words caused the man to shriek in shame as he rubbed the back of his head, an expression full of regret as he nodded. "I really hadn't meant to do that. I didn't think I could be such a scary guy. I was just coming over to say hello. I saw you standing over here by the lake and thought you might want some company, or to probably warn you about the fact that the lake was here." They studied his expression for a good few moments before allowing their body language to become less tense as he nodded in response to his words, which actually made some sense to them. Would be pretty dangerous if they hadn't known and actually believed that there was a path on the lake, especially if they didn't know the lake was actually there. "Thanks, I did know it was here. I was, thinking about why anyone would put fake ascension just to show up, end up responsible for murder." The comment earned Wyan a chuckle from the stranger. "Yeah, definitely wouldn't be a good idea. A good way to go either. Freezing death in a lake wouldn't be on my top ways to die list." Now it was their turn to giggle at his joke, a grin spreading across their face as he gestured to the lake and fridged a little bow. "Well, after you, my good sir." The stranger rose an eyebrow and tilted his head to the side before his eyes lit up in recognition, a smile spreading across his face before he cleared his throat. But I can't." He spoke with his best attempt at a posh accent. "For I would be a poor excuse of a gentleman if I were to allow myself to go ahead of you. I sniffed after you." That was perfect," he grinned as they clapped their hands. Wyan grinned as they clapped their hands, to which the stranger bowed. Thank you. I tried my best. I've got such a lovely audience after all." A comment which rewarded the man with a playful nudge to the arm from Wyan. Thanks, man. Bet you're a real charmer, too." A gentle blush dusted itself upon the man's cheeks as his gaze ventured off to the side bashfully, holding his hands behind his back as he let out a nervous chuckle. But then now you're just being nice. Crap. I actually have somewhere to be. Hey, I was wondering. You're really nice to talk to. So, would it be a bad thing to give you my number? I know we just met, but I think it would be nice to talk to you some more." Wyan took a few moments to process the request as they reached into their coat pocket, and grabbed their phone, taking it out and looking at it before looking back at the man. He was kind enough, it seemed, and it meant a lot that he had actually played along with their joke instead of just looking at them like they were a weirdo. It would have been incredibly embarrassing for them if that was how it went instead. Sure, I wouldn't mind that at all. You're a fun guy, from what I could tell. The stranger grins spread ear to ear with joy, revealing some rather sharp teeth as he restrained himself from jumping from happiness. He quickly exchanged contact information with Lion and said goodbye with a wave, then made his way back down the path in the direction that they had taken to come here. Lion had their phone in her chest as he watched the man walk away, then remembered just what they were out of the apartment for. Their eyes widened as they turned and began to use the path to reach the park exit. Though as they walked, a previous overlooked detail from the man came crashing right back in their face. Why had he been wearing any sort of winter attire? He had been in a blue t-shirt and sleeveless vest, for crying out loud. It was definitely beyond strange, though they hoped he would make it home quick enough to get into better clothes. Maybe he was better at handling the cold than they are. Oh, but at this temperature, the possibilities were making their head spin. They shook them away and focused on their task at hand instead. What were they getting again? Chapter 3, Lamb to the Slaughter. Lion closed the door to the apartment behind them as he stepped inside, sighing as they slipped off their boots and laid their coat upon the armrest of the couch before setting the grocery bag upon the kitchen island. They took a moment to stretch before grabbing the coffee beans out of the bag and putting them away, walking up to Lucy's door and giving it a gentle knock to the tune of shave and a haircut. "Hey, Lulu," they called to their roommate. "I got the beans. Left them in the kitchen if you need to make any coffee, all right?" They stood there waiting for a moment before shrugging and heading back to their room. Since it was likely that she was listening to music and working on something, she had said she was sending out applications to jobs to see if she could get one before the end of the winter, which they had truly admired her for. When they heard about this, they went wholly against her as she was blasting some tunes on her headphones, since there were pretty much about to do the very same thing. Well, they did their own work for college. They entered their room and immediately hit with a chill that caused them to hug themselves, shuddering as they looked around to locate the source of this shift in temperature. Their eyes finally fall upon their bedroom window and squinted as they noticed that it was raised up by just a few inches, its lock having seemingly come undone while they were out at the store doing groceries. The wind had blown in the snow that had settled itself upon the windowsill, leaving it strewn about on the floor and damping the carpet where it melted. Lion silently cursed to themselves as they moved quickly to shut the window and lock it properly once again, furrowing their eyebrows as they peered down at the mess that had been left on the ground with a small sigh. Snow was already heck to clean up when it managed to get dragged inside. That's why the two of them had decided to buy a doormat when it had begun to snow even more. They stepped out of their room for a moment to grab the broom and dustpan from the kitchen, only to be startled by a quick bang coming from their room. They quickly rushed back to their room with a broom raised up in case they would have to use it for self-defense, only to almost drop it when they noticed that the window had opened up once more and this time it had gone all the way up. They shivered as the harsh cold stuck against their body, leaving them with the desire to get their coat. They would have done so if the knowledge that hesitation to close this would end up with more snow and even colder room the longer they took. So they moved quickly and fought against the cold to close the window. They locked it again, make sure the lock was truly secure by tugging the window upwards. Then stepped back when they were certain it would not budge at all. They looked up. They looked at the new pile of snow that had blown into the room and resisted the urge to drill screws into the window to ensure that it would not come loose again. However, they knew that it wouldn't sit well with Dawn in the slightest, and they didn't want to pay extra fees for damages done to the property. So they settled with grabbing their broom and dustpan to sweep up any snow that had not yet melted, depositing it into their shower to let it melt there instead of their carpet. It was a process that took a few minutes to complete, and they were quite frustrated while doing so, standing near the window and hugging themselves as they shuffle on their feet with uncertainty. They had wanted to get some work done, but now their room was cold and the heater wasn't in the living room at the moment. They peeked out of the bedroom towards their roommate's room, thinking for a few moments before walking over. They raised their hands and knocked a few times, waiting patiently before knocking again with a little more force to really be heard. One crossed their arms and stared at the window door handle, wondering just what Lucy was doing at the moment to be unable to hear their knocking. Perhaps she wasn't actually home right now, though she would have likely left a note or told them that she wouldn't be home before they had left to get groceries. Besides, with this weather, where in the world would she go? They took a deep breath and shook their head as they resolved on taking steps inside to grab the heater. Then they would leave without disturbing their roommate at all. When opened the door as silently as they could and cried out in surprise at the same time as Lucy did, her hand having been mere centimeters away from her door handle. "Ooh, I thought you were busy or out of the apartment. Why were you opening the door when I knocked?" Lion questioned with the slightest hint of frustration as they tilted their head to the side, crossing their arms as they rose eyebrow. Lucy stared at Lion to complete silence for a few minutes before her eyes gently widened and seemingly remembered how to speak, stammering slightly as she spoke. "Oh, sorry, I was," she trailed off as she looked upon her room, her gaze falling upon her window that led to the fire escape. "I was fixing my damn window. The lock came undone, darling." She flashed a quick, sharp tooth grin as Lion before it faded as she cleared her throat, waving her hand with a sigh. "So, what happened again? Sorry about that. You, need something?" They blinked in confusion before gesturing towards the heater that had plugged into the corner. "Yeah, I just needed that. My window got locked also." "Well, broke or something. Had to clean up some snow, and now my room is all freaking cold." Lucy looked over at the heater and silently nodded as she walked over to the heater and plugged it. then carried over to them with a gentle smile. There you go, Sunspot. Stay warm, okay? I'm gonna make sure my window stays locked. Let me know if you need anything. They nod with a gentle smile as they lift up their heater that they provide to them, laying out a soft puff as he did so before turning to walk back to their room. They had certainly had been an odd little counter, to say the least, but at least they had managed to get what they wanted from it. They entered their room and immediately plugged the heater into the wall, turning it on and standing in front of it for a bit of relish the heat that it provided. The bliss was interrupted when their phone began to buzz in their pocket. They blinked and looked at it to check the notifications that they had, tilting their head to the side ever so slightly as they saw that they had a text from a number they didn't recognize. They opened the text to read it, squinting at the message. Hello, remember me? From the park? We talked about the lake and stuff. Oh, it was a man from the park. The one that had gone along with their joke and spared them from embarrassment in public. Something that could certainly not forget. They could certainly not forget. They had almost entirely forgotten that they had decided to exchange contact information with him so that they could continue talking to each other. Oh, hey, good to see that you didn't forget about me. How are you? They put their phone down on their bed as they laid down upon it, pulling the blanket over their body to stay toasty within before their phone buzzed to life again. Geez, this guy could definitely type real fast. Nothing much, just got done shoveling snow out of the driveway. So I'm staying inside where it's nice and warm, so I don't end up freezing my butt off. What about you? Just had a big fight with my window because it refused to stay closed. But now I'm basically doing the same thing, except I'm trying to turn my room into the oven. Yeah, sounds like heck. If you ever need help, I think I can fix things pretty well. Wine mulled over the question for some time as they left their phone laying next to them, looking towards the bedroom window and managing it coming undone once again. If that happened, then it would be likely that they'd have to contact Don to fix it. And since he said that he wouldn't force them to pay for any repairs made to the AC during the time, then it was pretty sure he wouldn't have them pay for a window that refused to stay closed. Thanks, but no thanks. It means a lot that someone would offer to do that, but I wouldn't be able to pay you. Besides, the landlord isn't making us pay for anything that happens to the apartment. Again, I appreciate it. Well, that's good to hear. Just so you know, you wouldn't have to worry about paying me. I know a lot of places are closed right now because of the snow, so I assume your job is one of those places. Well, that does mean a whole bunch to me. Maybe in the future. I'll let you know if anything comes up. Sounds like a plan to me. Hey, since we're talking, is there anything you want to know? That was an interesting question that Lion had certainly not been expecting to get from the man. One that they had to actually think about. There were definitely a few things that they wanted to know about this man, since they hadn't really gone the time to chat yesterday. But now that they were able to talk to each other like this, your name for stars. We never got properly introduce ourselves. My name's Wyan. Are you? You are? There was a few moments to pass since without response, something that leaves them worried that something had happened. My name isn't that important. Honestly, it's terrible. I'd much rather much ladder like it if you give me a nickname, you know? Guess a person can have their dislikes. They just never thought that they would have to make such a decision for someone before. This was the first for them. They put their phone down for a second and cross their arms as they look up at the ceiling, silently contemplating their options before something clicks inside their head. How about blue? Like your eyes. I think it matches you. Blue. I love it. It's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. I have one for you as well. How does darling sound? Their eyes widen upon reading the nickname that Blue had thought for them, taking a few moments to process what it was exactly seemed seeing on the screen. Darling was an intimate nickname to be given, but it was just a nickname, right? I think it's great. So, Blue, what do? You got a job? Sorry if it's a personal question or anything. No, don't worry about it. I work as a product tester. I get sent things from companies, and they pay me to review them on my channel. It's a good living, though I have to try finding something to hire for someone to hire for editing. Or, well, maybe not. I'm doing all right with editing things by myself. Well, how about you? You got a job at the diner? At the diner? A reviewer? Well, actually sounds pretty interesting. Maybe that they could end up finding his channel at some point. If they asked for the name of it. Wait, what did he say? I never told you about my job at the diner. How do you know? Oh, it was how I first saw you. Wouldn't you believe it? I always seen you at the diner before the whole winter thing happened. But I was never brave enough to actually come inside and say hello. I always got cold feet, no pun intended. But while I was taking a walk upon through the park, I saw you. So that's when I told you took my chance to talk to you. Well, it went well. Don't you agree? They couldn't help to find his truthful inspiration to be quite charming, adorable. They couldn't put their finger on it. Maybe whatever it may have been, it was interesting. I praise your honesty. I didn't realize I was the type to have an admirer. That was very sweet of you, Blue. I also can't imagine myself to be the type to make guys nervous either. Oh, Sunspot. You could make even the most confident men nervous. You're amazing. Don't forget that. They hadn't been expecting him to lay down the confidence like that, so they couldn't help but blush. That gently dusted their cheeks. They cleared their throat and chuckled nervously to themselves, idly typing out a few messages that ended up deleting from hesitation. They weren't entirely sure how to respond to this. It was nice. Was it too sudden? But it felt, well, good to be competent like this. Their mind was racing with thoughts that they didn't know was how to describe as well. But there was definitely a mix of anxiety and joy within them. They took a deep breath and raised their phone up. Then they began typing out their response. Thank you, Blue. I really at a loss for words. That was the kind of thing anyone has said to me recently. I shocked. Like I said, you're a sweet guy. You probably had a lot more to think about to charm me than I have. So I'm not too sure what to say. I know that I really do think your eyes are pretty. I've never seen someone with such a vibrant blue before. It's unique, at least to me. I'm sure it's time I'll be able to properly compliment you. Compliment you. I'll try my best. I'll wait patiently for that day. Sunspot, don't worry. I'm glad you find it. My eye is nice. I'm sorry to cut our conversation short, but I got to get back to some work that I need to do. See you later. Same here. Actually, have a good day, Blue. Lion shut their phone off and dropped it next to them with a sigh, staring up at the ceiling as they ran the events of the last minutes through their head. The more they did so, the more the smile had formed upon their face grew. Perhaps this whole winter thing wasn't going to be that bad, especially since it allowed them to meet Blue the way they had. They sat up and swung their feet off the bed, doing a little bit of stretch before heading over to their laptop to get started on their work for tonight. They haven't been able to start this morning, so they were going to have to push themselves quite a bit to get what they needed done today. The sunlights began to push past her eyelids and brought a discomfort to Lucy as she fought to stay asleep, though she soon began to falter. Her eyelids open and squinty hit by the light of the outside. Wait, the outside? Crap, she should have hit her first. How she should have hit her first was the goddamn cold. Lucy looked around slowly and tried to rub her eyes, only to find that she could not move her arms at all. She squirmed to tug against whatever was bringing her in place, craning her neck back as much as she could to see that she was tied up to some sort of wooden pike. The discomfort of the blinds being used to keep her tied up, the onslaught of cold upon her body, and raised dread from the realization that she had seemingly been kidnapped, was now enough to push her struggles further as she continued to squirm around. Whoever was holding her wrist against the pike was digging in more as she squirmed around, an uncomfortable feeling that turned into pain the more she moved around. She took this as her cue to take a break and properly get her bearings, trying to figure out where she was. Her gaze traveled around and took in everything before her. She was outside in what appeared to be a forest, though she was certain that there was absolutely no forest near the city. She was still in her pajamas from this morning, so this means she had been here recently, or else she would have frozen death upon much earlier, if she was here since YN had left for groceries. It just made a sense. Well, none of us really made much sense right now. A shudder ran down her spine as her adrenaline began to slip away from, and her body reminded her that she was absolutely freezing, her teeth clattering, and her jaw as she squeezed her eyes shut. Surely this had to be a dream, right? Maybe someone was already coming to help her. There's no way that no one would notice her disappearance, especially since she's been gone for so long already. Wyatt was probably already back from the store, so they might have already called the cops once they noticed that she wasn't home. These thoughts are what filled Lucy's mind with hope during the situation, a vital part of her mindset that she would cling to desperately. Her hope, at the very moment, gave her will to continue her struggle. She hoped what kept her from submitting to the icy winds that blew snow upon her body, that left her trembling like a leaf in the wind. Wakey, wakey, lamb, rise and frickin' shine. Isn't it gray out? Came the voice of a man from behind Lucy. Her eyes widened as she struggled to try to give a good look at whoever her assailant was. "Oh, you still struggling, cute. But you'll just die tired. It's not like it's going to warm you up," the stranger remarked with a chuckle, as the soft sound of snow shifting could be heard from behind her. The noise continued for a moment before the man finally stepped around and into Lucy's view, his figure blocking out the sun and casting a shadow over her form. Near glowing blue eyes peered down at her from above on a face that held a confident smirk. An expression that held suffocation and murderous intent behind it. The man wasn't dressed properly for the cold at all. Yet he still seemed unfazed by it. "Who the frick are you?" Lucy managed to spit out through clattering teeth as she glared daggers up to the man, who merely crossed arms and said nothing as he studied the woman he managed to capture. He was a predator severing his prey before he struck, attempting to decide where best to do so, or how it should be done. His attention finally returned to Lucy after a few moments. However, as he lowered his arms and crouched down and right in front of her, to be eye level, "I'm Wyan's boyfriend, and you?" He tapped her cheek with a palm, then gave it a squeeze with his fingers. "Must be the butt of a roommate they call a friend. Tell me about yourself." "Just kidding. I know a lot about you, actually." "Their boyfriend? Pfft, you? You're freaking funny, Streambeam, and you don't know crap about me. Don't lie to me." She grinned despite the worry coursing through her veins and the cold enveloping her body. To this, the man before her rose an eyebrow, sprouting the unmused expression before he chuckled inside. "I'll call you Lulu because your friends call you Lucy. You can't pay your half of the rent, forcing them work their butt off for you while you try to fail to score a job. It's probably because you're a druggie, an addict." Using yourself, giving yourself out to any guy who's giving you a quickie. Does that sound right? He grinned, and a dangerous, sharp grin as it gazed bore holes in their skull. Lucy's gone pale as she listened to this, and suddenly had covered her face, squeezing her eyes closed as she shook her head. "I'm not like that. I'm not like that," he mocked her with his hand, rolling his eyes before staring into her. "Shut the frick up. Yes, you are. You're a frickin' parasite. A pest, and the pest gets dealt with, especially when the resistance is yours, my darling. Besides, why would they want you when I could be better than you?" His grin spread ear to ear, and something began to change about him, something that caused Lucy's eyes to widen, and for her to go deathly still. His tired form began to change before her very eyes, took on appearance of snow that surrounded them ever so slowly, allowing her to process what she was seeing. His clothes lost their color and took the powdery texture of snow. His hand on her cheeks became as cold as ice as he continued to shift. Then the snow that made up his body began to morph around and change him entirely. A mockery of hair began to be formed. His form became more feminine in appearance. Soon Lucy was left face to face with herself, like a snowman from heck had managed to take on her entire look in less than a minute. His eyes shifted in color. His hair took on pink tints. His clothes became as colorful as the ones that she would often wear before the snow fell. And when it all said and done, Lucy couldn't breathe. She was actually staring in the mirror. wasn't actually staring in the mirror, even though she had just watched the whole thing unfold right before her eyes. She was having trouble comprehending the fact that it had happened. She was struck silent with awe as a man-woman thing, as it began to use its free hand to play with its hair, humming in delight before flashing a sharp-toothed smile at her. A smile that didn't belong to her own face, a smile that was just wrong. How do I look? I think I could be a real good actor, or maybe a body double. My career options are pretty open. It spoke in her voice with a chuckle as it took its free hand and grabbed her by the chin, moving her face about to further study her compilation, down to the finest details. Its face shifted a bit more as it copied these details down, leaving no trace that could distinguish the two apart. Satisfied with its work, it let go of her. What are you? Was the first thing she said as she managed to find her voice once again. After coming down with shock, her gaze unsteady as she looked at herself in whatever freakish cologne stood before her. I already told you, it said with a hint of annoyance in its voice before its form began to shift once again, returning to the man she had been talking to earlier. I'm Wyan's boyfriend. They would never love a freak like you, butthole. She spat as she bared her teeth at it, glaring daggers as she continued to lash out. You're going to die alone when they reject you. You'll see, you freaking scumbag. Just you what? Her eyes widened as she was cut off by the scrunching of flesh and crushing of bones. Her gaze shakily traveling down as she forced through the snow to see what was happening. The thing had forced its entire fist through her midsection, shoving aside organs and breaking ribs in the process as its bloody hand grabbed at the pike before her with a grip so intense that it began to crack the wood. She froze her gaze up as blood began to drip slowly out her mouth. Her breathing became unsteady as she locked eyes with the thing. Its eyes were glowing a dangerous shade of blue, and its expression had darkened with pure rage. Its pupils having thinned into pin pricks as it tilted its head to the side. Who are you to decide what they want? You don't know what's best for them like I do. Its voice was cold and lacking emotion, though Lucy could tell there was undenying anger behind it. She let out a choked cry of pain as it began to twist its head and, in turn, her insides as it snapped the pike clean in half. There was no moment of respite from the pain as it let go of the broken wood and pulled its crimson-coated arm out of the cavity it had left in her abdomen, kicking her over onto her chest as her entails began to shift unnaturally towards the exit that had been created through the forceful means she didn't get to see as it grabbed the broken pike and walked over to be standing over top her. Nor was she thinking about how it was raising it up and preparing to lodge it straight into her skull. Her last thoughts were of Wyan, and if they were okay, then the whole world went dark. Chapter 4. Calm before the... Wyan had hunched over on their bed as they stared at the screen of the laptop that they set up in front of them, eyes fixated upon the blank document. They had grown quite accustomed to seeing since they began working today. It was supposed to be used to write an essay for their college major class, an essay that was worth 50% of their final grade. Yet for some reason, they couldn't quite grasp the motivation to actually write something out. Every time they tried to, they would get a few lines in before doubting themselves and deleting everything. They've gone through this very process for the last 3 hours, not once having been able to put more than 3 sentences on the document. It was starting to get incredibly frustrating. They didn't understand why their brain had to be so damn boggled and unable to hold on to idea for so long when it comes to this, but it can do just fine for other things. They close their eyes for a moment and rub their temples. With a heavy sigh, racking their brain one more time for anything that could end up putting on the document to at least properly start the essay. Though after a minute or so of thinking without anything to show for it, they opened their eyes and closed the laptop before putting it away. After that, Lion strolled over to their bed and flopped onto it with a groan. This sucked. They rolled their eyes onto their back and stared up at the ceiling for a few moments before draping their arm over their eyes, taking a deep breath and letting out a sigh. They laid like this for a minute or two before moving their arm to grab their phone from their pocket, checking the time before opening it up to see if there was any notifications. Lo and behold, there was a few texts that had been missed from a few people, the first of which came from Lucy. Her message explained how she would be away from the apartment for a while, since a few of her friends had invited her to stay in their place for a while, and she had already left while they were working, something Lion assumed they had not heard because they were so lost in their own little world. It would be a shame to not wake up to coffee already being ready, like they were used to it. But who were they to stop Lucy from enjoying her life? They sent a reply wishing her to have fun before moving on to the other messages they had. The next came from TK, reminding them of the deadline for the essay that they had just broken their head trying to deal with. It was a reminder that they wanted it all, since it was adding more stress on top of everything. Lion knew TK was just looking out for them, but they honestly needed to just forget the assignment entirely for a while, so that they wouldn't beat themselves up over it. They didn't end up replying to their message right away, but they would remind themselves to do so later. The last message came from Blue, sent to them about an hour ago. Hope you're having a good day. It was a simple message, to be completely honest, yet such a simple message left a smile on their face as they thought of what to say in response. Blue was clearly a friendly guy, and given the type of people they had to deal with the diner before, it's a shame he never actually had courage to come inside. They would have loved to serve someone like him. They would wish more people would take after his attitude. They chuckled softly at the thought before raising their phone up, find more inspiration to respond to him than they did have for writing their essay. I've been doing all right, thanks. Sorry I didn't respond to this sooner. I was doing some work for college. I hope you're having a good day, too. They set the phone down beside them with a content smile on their face, though their phone almost immediately buzzed to life the moment they had let it go. They almost forgot how quick Blue seems to be when it came to responding to text. In part of their mind wondered if he was that fast just for them, or if he was always like this, though they pushed that aside as they checked what he had written for them. Oh, Sunspot, you don't have to apologize. If you're busy, I understand. Hopefully your room got warmer throughout the day, and your work wasn't too much for you. I've been busy with posting a video, just barely missed the deadline on it. Guess I've been distracted lately. I get how it is. I'm just to be distracted and trying to get stuff done. It's heck. But at least you're actually able to get anything done, right? I guess it's true, though now I have nothing to do now. This left Wyan thinking about it for a bit, since they were in the same position as well. There wasn't much they could do without Lucy around, and they didn't have the inspiration to continue working on their essay right now. Plus, they didn't feel tired enough to call it a night yet. They furrowed their eyebrows as they fought with the options. Then one glaring choice stood out to them. They crossed their arms and thought hard, then sighed as they took their phone and set up. Well, since we're both bored, would you like to call? I mean, I don't have anything better to do. You're fun to talk to. They wouldn't have been too surprised when he almost immediately called them, though it certainly left them with a smile on their face as they answered. Well, that was quick. There came a chuckle from their end of the call. Well, nothing's quick when it comes to you, Wyan. I know you just answered, but how's it been? His voice holds joy with his tone. They can tell that quite easily. They're charmed that someone would like to talk to him this much. I could be better, but you don't have to worry about that. Okay? Well, they said as they stood up and held their phone in one hand while the other took hold of their blanket. Digging along with them as they walked out of the living room, things get better, and I didn't call you to weigh you down with my problems or anything. They trail off as they placed the blanket on the couch, then cleared their throat as they walked over to the kitchen to warm up some leftovers of today's lunch. I called to relax and talk with you. I know, but you know that if you ever need to talk, I'm always open, right? It's what friends are for. There's genuine concern in his voice, concern that never respected someone brand new to hold for them. Though as they thought about how he had said he wanted to talk to them for a while, it made a bit more sense. They could almost hear TK warning them against trusting someone like him, but they pushed the thought aside as they take the leftovers out of the microwave. There wasn't a need for negativity right now. They're just talking with a friend who cares about them, and right now, that's all they needed. Thank you, Blue. That's actually a lot for me. A lot to me. That means a lot to me. I hope you know that. Well, he started as he seemed to be moving around on their end. The sound of shuffling audible throughout the phone. I'm just glad that I might be making your day better. That means I'm doing something right after all. They couldn't help but giggle that leaves their lips as they take little nibbles of their food, something that's grown less interesting since they started this conversation with Blue. You're doing great, Blue. I promise. Thanks for taking your time out of your day to talk to me. Roommate's out of the place right now, so I'm just bored and unmotivated. Doing my work, or rather, not being able to do it, really took it out of me. Well, darling, I'm sure you'll be able to find that motivation again in no time. Just gotta have some faith in yourself. I know someone like you can do it. Someone like me, huh? They echo softly as they look at the TV ahead of them, the faintest reflection visible if they focus hard enough. Someone like them? Blue, you're flattering. But I'm not one special. I'm human. I fail. I make mistakes. I get upset. There isn't someone like you, for me. I appreciate though. There is silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, they worried that they may have upset Blue with their response. However, he seems to find his voice after a few seconds. Darling, I've always going to remind you that you're special. At least to me. You say that you're human, but by definition, it also makes you unique. Your mistakes and failures define you, darling. I wouldn't have it any other way. So for me, there will always be a reason for me to believe you're special. And for that reason, you'll always be special to me. Talking about infatuation, its words leave Lion stunned into silence for a good few moments, which he seems to mistake as something bad as he quick to try to correct himself. Crap, I didn't, look, I know I said I like you, and I was nervous to talk to you, but I still do. I still am nervous, at least sometimes. Other times, hearing your voice fills me with confidence. I didn't know I could have. Crap. I'm still laying on it heavy, ain't I? Look, it just sucks hearing you put yourself down like that. Lion stunned into silence as they listened to Blue's words, eyes wide as they fidgeted with the blanket that had wrapped around themselves. To say that they were touched would be putting it lightly. They really needed to get out more if this was what was making them blush. His words made it quite clear already that he was interested in them, though they didn't realize that it was to this extent, or maybe always this clear, and they were just bad at reading obvious signs. The more they thought about it, the more likely it became. They could hear TK's voice lecturing them in the back of their mind, and while they appreciated their close friend, they would choose to ignore the imaginary TK for now. This feeling was warm and cozy, and I didn't want to let it go. Thank you, Blue, they mumbled softly into the phone as they dug themselves with a soft sigh. You said that a lot recently. Huh. I mean, every time I say it, or will say, this weird winter has, put down into the dumps since it started. But I know you said you really like me and all, but surely it'll be best to get to know each other first. If you're ever in the city, we can either come to my place since my roommate is gone, or we could go to the park like we did before. Whatever sounds good to you. Yeah? They waiting for his response leaves Lion nervous the entire time, especially since the majority of the conversation has had moments of silence between the two of them. His voice becomes a relief to hear because of this. I would have loved to hang out with you, Sunspot. Any place sounds good, but maybe not the park. You really don't look like you enjoy the cold. We can always just relax at your place. They can't help but help the sigh of relief that escapes them upon hearing his answer, though they only realized that it had been audible, with a light chuckle from the other end of the call grabs their attention. Embarrassment floods through their system and collects as a blush upon their face as they stammered lightly. Hey, listen, it's okay, it's really cold, okay? I feel like an ice cube every time I go out there for any reason. The chuckle subsides after he takes a moment to breathe. One could practically hear a smile on his face as he spoke. I understand, Sunspot. You just sound cute when you're embarrassed is all. I could tell by the way you're headed yourself that you really don't like the snow out there. I won't hold you against you. I don't know the last time it's been this cold. I'm getting off track. If you send me directions, I'll be over there as soon as I can. That nervous and cheerful attitude returns to his voice, one that returns the smile to Lion's face as they send over the directions by text. I guess I'll see you soon, huh? They sit up as they say this and look around the apartment immediately looking for things that could be cleaned up and wondering what to prioritize first. They eventually settle upon doing the dishes before Blue's voice pulls them out of their head and back into the conversation. They're soon, there as soon as possible, okay? They frowned as from their eyebrows as they tried to process exactly what he just said, though they just ended up signing and standing up as they walked over to bring their plate of half-finished food to the kitchen. Repeat that? I was spacing out, they admit sheepishly, as they let out a bear's chuckle leave them. Understand, don't worry. I said I'll be there soon. I'll see you then, okay? They smiled gently as they bid him farewell and set the phone down, throwing away what remained of the leftovers that they had been eating before setting to work on doing the dishes. They hadn't had anyone over in a while, not since TK had come over Thanksgiving for a few hours. They crossed their arms when they finished with the dishes and looked around, taking into view of the entire apartment. They would just clean up the place if TK was visiting again for their Thanksgiving dinner, and that meant a full deep clean. It's about 45 minutes later when there comes a knock at the apartment door, which startles YN to the point of almost dropping the hamper. Finished laundry they'd been carried out to their room as they put away. Coming, they quickly set down the hamper next to their bed before their attention was drawn to the gray and white hoodie they had set aside for themselves, as well as a baseball cap. They hesitate as they thought about if they really wanted to wear it, shifting on their feet nervously before quickly moving to slip on the hoodie over themselves with the hat. They looked at themselves in the mirror and did a few more adjustments before feeling then satisfied. They laughed at themselves as their head for being so worried about their parents. As they made their way to the front door, they placed their hand on the doorknob, took a deep breath, then opened it up. There Blue stood with a nervous smile as his attention from his shoes up to Wyan as he opened the door, a white box held under his arm with a red ribbon wrapped around it to scare the lid. He looked a bit more comfortable in the black snow coat, which led them to believe that they could have imagined him not wearing such a thing the first time they met. He raised his free hand and offered a small wave. Hey, it's nice to see you again. How are you? Sorry, I took so long. I had things I had to deal with, and I wanted to get you a gift. I didn't realize how late I was, and the sidewalks were icy. They raised a hand to cut him off as a giggle escaped their lips, his nervous expression softening into a smile as he adjusted the box he held under his arm. You don't have to be sorry about all of that. Whiten smiled gently as they stepped inside for Blue to enter. Come on in. Make yourself at home. Like I said, my roommate's out for a while. I don't know when she'll be back, so you don't have to worry about it. Blue stood unmoving for a few moments as he simply took in the sight of lions in casual wear. It was something that he had already seen, sure, but accompanied by their nervous demeanor as they invited him into their apartment, this was the once-in-a-lifetime sight that he couldn't afford to ever forget. He soon snapped out of it, however, as he cleared his throat, gifting them a smile with a bit more confidence as he entered the apartment. He was nervous before, sure, but why would he actually be nervous if his darling was actually taking the first steps and inviting him into their apartment? Or when they hadn't pushed him away when he was so open about his adoration towards them. It was a clear match set in stone by the heavens above. There was no denying this. Wyan could see how lost in thought Blue was as it closed the door when he stepped inside. Their nervousness rising to the surface again as they glanced around the apartment well behind them. They were certain that everything was clean and tidy. So why did he look so focused? Was he more attentive than they were when he came to details? Could he be seeing a mess that they had overlooked? Why was he just standing there? Why were they just standing there? Why were they so nervous? Oh, God. Blue looked over his shoulder and saw Wyan's face turn pale as their gaze was focused ahead. However, they didn't seem to be exactly looking at anything. They were freaking out. But what about? He frowned gently, reaching out, placed his reassuring hand on her shoulder, which seemed to do well to snap him out of whatever daze they seemed to have been in. A toothy grin on his face was pretty much contagious as they seemed less intense, a smile gracing their expression as they sighed. Sorry, guess I spaced out again. They rubbed their back of their head as their gaze shifted downwards for a moment. Though Blue's soft laughter rose them, there was their attention back to him quickly. Darling, whatever you're thinking about, I can assure you that you wouldn't have to worry. He hummed happily as he turned towards the apartment. You have a nice place, much better than mine, though you might have a different opinion about that. We'll see soon enough, he mumbled, the last part under his breath, as he looked around and noted how everything had been clearly cleaned up before he arrived. Had they been making it presentable? Was this what they were so nervous about? That's adorable. He turned back towards Wyan and held the box out for them. For you. They blinked as they saw the box he held out for them. Their smile stayed on their expression as they took it and looked at the red ribbon they kept in the lid. They carefully undid the wrapping the ribbon around their hand as they removed the lid from the box and let out a soft sigh at what was within. Inside was adorable black ribbon that held them together were 2 roses. Their thorns had been removed and their natural aroma added to their beauty. Len loved flowers. They had thought about keeping a few flowers on their windowsill or near the fire escape, with Dalen's permission, but the blizzard had essentially killed that idea. They're beautiful, they spoke softly, as he lifted the roses delicately from the box that lay within, admiring them in their entirety as he twisted the flowers around their fingers. Aren't the stores closed right now? How did you get these? Blue blushed gently as he looked to the side, hands held behind his back as he spoke. Well, actually, I have been growing them at my place for a while. I really love gardening, so I set up a room in my house when the blizzard came so my plants would still grow without issue. I thought you seemed like the type to like flowers, he continued, as he looked back at them, a bashful smile on his face as he cleared his throat. So I brought them to you. I'm really glad that you like them. Do you like them, right? If you don't, I can get you something else for you. He panicked at all the possibilities of having upset Wyan with his gift, though his reaction only set them off into a fit of giggles. Blue, his gaze was focused entirely on them now. I promise I love them. Roses are my favorite. They smiled at him as he seemed to relax fur because of this. His worried expression changed into a smile of his own as he nodded. There you go, smiling again. Find a seat on the couch and put these somewhere. Wyan ventured off to the kitchen with a content hum, looking around for a vase before realizing that they don't have one. So they chose the next best thing, a glass cup. They filled it up with water and carefully moved the roses into it, placing the cup on the kitchen island before looking towards the living room to see that Blue had taken a seat on the couch. He gently pressed his hands onto his knees and squeezed, his eyes glued onto his shoes as they slowly swayed to and from. He was brought out of thoughts when he felt a shift in weight on the couch, his gaze traveling up to look to his side. Lion sat beside him with a sigh, looking over to the little cup with roses that seemed to perfect where it was. Blue followed their gaze and had his heart skip a beat at the sight, his smile spreading ear to ear as he looked down to YN. He felt honored, truly honored to have his gift put on such a place, right in the open, where anyone and everyone could know he had been the one to give them the roses. He reached out and gently shifted aside a strand of hair that had come undone from their small parent ponytail, moving it behind their ear with a gasp of surprise when they turned around to face him. A embarrassed blush swept across his cheeks as he retracted his hand and rubbed the back of his head, chuckling softly for a moment before clearing his throat and pointing to their hair. You, had a small strand of it. I just caught a glimpse of it. Blame me for being a neat flake. Not to say that you look great. You don't look great. He smiled and raised his hands up and shook them about, eyes wide as he attempted to correct himself out, but instead devolved into desperate stammers. You look perfect. I would never say that. You don't. Oh, Christ. He was interrupted when Lion pressed their lips upon his cheek quickly, silencing him as his entire face took a rosy hue. A love-struck smile spread across his face as he let out a love-drunk chuckle, tilting his head to the side as he spoke. You really are a charmer, aren't you? Their face was just as red as his as they spoke. You don't really expect to be doing that, but at the moment, it was just right. You're a dork, too. He blinked before chuckling a bit, sighing as he wrapped an arm around their waist and pulled them flush against his chest in an embrace. They looked up to be met with a smirk and half-lit eyes. Blue raising an eyebrow as he spoke. Me, a dork? Are you sure it isn't the other way around, darling? They felt their hearts skip a beat inside their chests as they struggled to find the words they wanted to say. Instead, they simply buried their head against his chest and took a deep breath. He smelled the cigarettes and roses, though something that smoothed them and allowed their body to relax. Boo didn't mind at all, allowing them to do so as he wrapped his other arm around them and placed his hand upon the small of their back to keep them close to him. Inhaled their scent through their hair, a mixture of perfume and roses that had brought for them. He grinned against their head, thinking about how they had put the perfume on for him. Are the stars aligning, he thought to himself, as he sat there in a comfortable silence, holding who he believed to be his match, made in heaven above. He had them right in his arms. It would be so simple, so easy to whisk them away from this dread place, but he held on to his resistance and patience for now. Fate rewards those who wait long enough. After all, he was willing to wait as long as it takes for them to come to him on their own accord. Soon, Sunspot, he repeated, gently pressed a kiss on the top of their head and closed his eyes as he lay there with them, feeling their body relax as sleep began to weigh heavily upon them. He was aware that they'd been working well into the night on their essay for their college class, so they had not gotten any proper rest since they had finished working for the day. He felt a pang of guilt strike in his heart at the realization that he had also kept them awake for longer than they should have. With his arrival, scolding himself for being so thoughtless. He looked down at Lion's sleeping form, gently running his hand up and down their back in slow motions. He had been this close to them before, but never like this. He was glad that they trusted him enough to be vulnerable like this around him. He closed his eyes and sighed, knowing full well that he wouldn't let their trust be misplaced. Chapter 6. Snowstorm, Part 1. It'd been a pretty long time since YN had managed to actually get a good night's rest. That didn't happen to have nightmares that involved the snow. But the same night they had slept with Blue was completely different. This was actually happened to sleep quite well, at least for their own standards. That is, it was such a good rest that they actually didn't really want any coffee when they woke up, which usually what they want the minute they blink away the sleep from their eyes. Instead, they realized that Blue wasn't beside them on the couch when they woke up. They were more focused on actually figuring out where he was. Wasn't really that much of a challenge to do. In the grand scheme of things, they live in an apartment, after all, so all they really wanted to do was sit up a bit. Right then, with that, they easily spotted him in the kitchen, just staring at the coffee maker, with a puzzled expression on his face. "What you doing?" YN asked suddenly, something that surprised Blue enough to break him out of his staring contest with the kitchen machinery. He wasn't one to get caught off guard by just about anything. He suppose being around YN was actually starting to make him soften up a bit in that regard. Or maybe it was just because he had been lost in his thoughts. He didn't really know what to blame. He sighed and shook his head, shook away the thoughts from his head, and turned to face YN, offering them a gentle smile. "Well, morning there, sleepyhead. To answer you," he trailed off as he turned towards the machinery, staring at it for a few seconds more before speaking up again. Nothing much. I'm pretty sure your coffee maker works differently than the one I have at home. I think," he mumbled softly as he crossed his arms and glanced over it again. "Or maybe I'm just not doing something right. Oh, whatever it is, I'm sure I'll get it to work." He chuckled nervously as he noticed the questioning look that was on Lion's face. His cheeks flushed red with embarrassment as he rubbed the back of his head. Know it's pretty, stupid, but I can't even get something like this to work. But I swear they'll get it to work eventually. Trial and error." He was fully expecting it to be ridiculed by YN for being unable to work a coffee machine. But that's not all what YN was planning to do, though they did giggle a bit, much to Blue's dismay. But it wasn't mean-spirited giggle at all. They sighed as they walked up to him and gave him his shoulder a little pat, offering a gentle smile as they pointed to themselves. "Guess we're in the same boat then, huh? You don't gotta worry about something like that. 'Cause I have to admit, I also don't know how the best way to use this thing myself. Anyways, my roommate Lucy's usually the one that leaves coffee out for me before I work." They sighed once more as they walked up to the machine, crossing their arms and giving it a little glare. It's weird, too, because I can make coffee at the diner just fine, but this machine never actually ends up making it properly for me. They look over their shoulder and offer a reassuring smile to Blue. It sucks that she's not here now. She'll tease us both about this, so I'll promise to keep this between us, if you promise to do the same. They bumped their shoulder into Blue's side as they raised an eyebrow, which knocked him out of his dumbfounded state of simply staring at Wyan. He's been so lost with the information that his darling happened to have a same fault as him that he didn't even realize he was staring at them, too infatuated with their perfection. He blinked a few times after he had been bumped, returning his attention to Wyan with a stuck graze plastered all over his face. Of course, darling. That sounds absolutely perfect. Wyan raised an eyebrow as he looked into Blue's loving eyes, though simply chuckling as they began to grab a few things that would need to make breakfast. All right, dork. Would you go sit down and make yourself comfortable? I'm going to go ahead and make us something to eat. I don't want you to worry about yourself with helping me. Blue was about to open his mouth to offer his help anyways, but Wyan could see the defiance in his eyes, immediately put to stop to it before he could speak. You're a guest here, Blue. I wouldn't be a very good host if I didn't cater to my guest needs. Now, would I? Besides, not to brag, but I think I can make a pretty damn good breakfast, they said with a sly grin on their face, which was something that Blue couldn't help but find adorable. So he decided that he might as well play along with what they want from him. He liked this feisty attitude they seemed to have when it came to cooking anyway. So he held his hands up and slender as he flaged a disappointment sigh, turning away from the kitchen, walking towards the couch with a chuckle. All right, I'm going. Just let me know if you need anything, okay? He added with a smile as he looked over his shoulder, flashing a sharp-toothed smile and pointing his thumb to himself. I'm your boyfriend, after all. With that said and done, he went to try and found the controller for the TV, waving Wyan to simply stare and process what they just had heard. That's right, they thought to themselves as they turned towards the bread that they had grabbed to make some grilled cheese. We're a thing now, aren't we? I mean, he really is a nice guy. I think Lulu might really like to meet him when she comes back from hanging out with her friends. They smile at the thought, especially since they knew Lulu would always wonder when they would ever manage to score someone that could treat them well. Not being brave enough, she would say whenever they discussed the topic. You really gotta try to find someone at least once. You miss all the shots you don't take, after all. They always thought that she had given them some oddly good advice that day, though wondered where she had gotten such a thought from. They end up finding a poster with the exact same line in the trash can that afternoon. They chuckle softly at the memory, sighing as they went over to the fridge to get some cheese. Blue, on their hand, had actually managed to find the controller, simply resting on the arm of the couch. He had missed it the first time. He could not say, but now they found it. He could actually be able to use the TV, so he switched it on and began flipping for the channels to see what he could find. he would end up stopping on a news channel that happened to be covering the weather at the moment. He already knew what the weather was outside. Just about everyone knew. Cold, nothing else. Nothing was really changing about that anytime soon. Though at this point, he would listen to some random anchor talk about something everyone already knew about, instead of just endlessly moving for the channels in hopes of finding something. In breaking news, the news anchor began after covering how the weather was shaping out to be for the upcoming days. We've been given information that the police have located the victim of a recent murder. Blue could hear the faint clicking of the plates come to a halt. He heard exactly who the victim was. He knew exactly who the victim was. He knew exactly how the report would go. He could at least make a pretty accurate guess. At least. He even had the controller in his hands and could have changed the channel at any moment. So any moment that he pleased, but he didn't. There was something sadistically pleasing to him to come with the thought that Wyan was now listening. He wanted them to know, to some degree, of what power they held over them, even if they weren't going to know he had done it. The police have identified the victim of a young woman by the name of Lucy Ann Emera, who had been last seen by her friends 2 days ago. Her body was found under a layer of snow after a farmer's dog had located it. We now take it to Jonathan at the scene of this crime. Wyan had stepped out of the kitchen by now, their face completely devoid of emotion, as they stared at the TV in utter silence. The camera then switched over to a reporter standing in a field of snow, a young man dressed heavily in winter clothing. Beside him stood a police officer with a more gruff appearance, though even he looked a bit uneasy standing there. "Thank you," the reporter said to the camera as a spotlight was now given to him. "I'm here with Officer Williams at the scene of the gruesome crime. Now, it should have been known that it's likely that things may be described in graphic detail, so anyone faint of heart should not be present for this, especially children. So the station would like to warn all families beforehand that it would be best to either change channels or have children present to move to a different room. With that said, Officer Williams, what can you tell us about what was uncovered here?" Jonathan asked as he held the microphone out towards the officer, who seemed to have been lost in his thoughts, but snapped out of it when his name was mentioned. "Right. We're unable to give out too much information right now, because we don't really have much info to be working off of to begin with." He sighed as he turned and gestured towards the tree line, one that a few officers were currently walking around and taking photos. "The body was found here around 8 in the morning, but could have been here much, much longer than that. The snow was pretty wet, as the fact that the body is almost completely frozen right now has made it almost impossible for our forensics team to estimate a time of death for the victim. But we're working hard as we can to find out. And what can we do? What can we be said about the victim herself at the moment, if anything?" The poor asked after William spoke. The officer simply shook his head. Any and all information regarding the victim can be found in the autopsy report after one is made. I'm not sure if one will be made public after autopsy is done, so you have to check at some point. Jonathan nodded as he turned to face the camera. With that said, Local law enforcement officers have decided to release a statement requesting all civilians to stay within their homes for the time being. A crime of this degree is, and I quote, unheard of in this area. So the safety of civilians had been put into a spotlight. It's already recommended that due to the inclement weather conditions on the horizon, that all civilians should be indoors and only venture outside for necessities. Now, more than ever, is in this recommendation being pushed forward back to you at the station. One stood behind the couch in complete silence as they kept their gaze locked onto the TV screen, simply staring at as they listened to all the details that the police were able to give at the moment. The news anchor, when it was their turn to speak again, began to reveal that the autopsy report was indeed made public not too long ago, but heavy thumping began to ring out in Ryan's ears as that cut through the news anchor's expiration. They stepped back and shook their head in disbelief as the thumping in their ears grew louder, whispering under their breath, "No, no, 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 no," over and over as they pleaded with anyone anything. But their words only fell upon joyful ears. Ba-bump, ba-bump. This could be real, right? No, this could actually be happening, right? Could it be? Could it? Maybe it was a nightmare that they were meant to have. Maybe they were still sleeping. Yeah, they had to be it, right? That had to be the more rational explanation. Ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. They crouched down and covered the ears with their hands, squeezing their eyes shut, closed. As the noise in their ears grew louder and louder, they hadn't even realized that they'd been crying, shuddering sobs as they drowned out by the damn noise in their ears that couldn't go away. Ba-bump, 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 ba-bump. Louder and louder the beating drum grew in their ears, banging around in their head. They wanted to stop. Why wouldn't it stop? Why was this happening? Why was there any of this happening? Their beating quickened rapidly, alongside their increasing panic, their body trembling like a frail leaf in the wind. Then everything was quiet as they felt a pair of arms wrapped around them, felt the weight of another body press up against their side, a comfort that pierced through the panic, just as those blue eyes once did in their dreams. They woke up to meet a worried gaze of Blue, whose eyes brought with them the same feeling of safety they had been seeking, begging for right now. They didn't say anything as they buried their face into his chest, sobbing into his shirt as they wrapped their arms around him. In turn, Blue didn't say anything either. He didn't have to right now. All that mattered was he was here for his darling. All that mattered was he could make them feel safe. Soon, of course, they would understand why he had to do what he did. But right now wouldn't be the best time at all. It would be better to do so when they were finally home. But all of that could wait. There wasn't going to be another chance or brace them as closely as this anytime soon. So the same urgency that Wyan was holding onto him, their arms held him like a vice grip. That, well, he was certain he could easily get out of. He knew he didn't want to. He was the anchor for them right now. This was certain. He gently kissed the top of their head and placed a hand on their back, rubbing circles in an attempt to smooth their still trembling body. He whispered carefully chosen words of assurance against their hair as he held them close to himself, relishing in the knowledge that he pressed along was alone was bringing them comfort. His presence alone was bringing them comfort. He found a bit of pride within within the knowledge, as well as he knew that everything that he was doing, a plan that he had carefully and meticulously crafted, was now coming together as he intended it to. It was about half an hour later when Wyan's crying seemed to come to end, though there was occasional shuddering breath and need to wipe their nose. There was still a heavy moment of silence that came after, though it was broken by Blue as he spoke. "Hey," a single word, just enough to get Wyan to look up at him, their face stained with red streaks from dry tears, their eyes red from how long they'd been crying. To anyone, this would be a sight to make one feel sympathy, but seeking Wyan like this had a much more difficult effect on them, a different effect on Blue. He couldn't help but find them absolutely stunning like this. Their expression was that of raw, unfiltered emotion. He knew that regardless of any expression that they held, they would always look beautiful. Anger, disgust, fear, and more would look wholly upon the face of his angel. He's getting ahead of himself here. He broke out of his thoughts as he gently reached down and swept some stray strand of hair that had gone stuck in Wyan's face, offering a sympathetic smile in his attempt to seem genuine. In truth, he was incredibly ecstatic that the roommate's body was found, but that wasn't too important right now. He was more pressed to matters in his hands. "I don't know how best to say this. I'm sorry. I was really ready to I was never really the greatest with covering others. Had no experience, you know." He chuckled nervously, then cleared his throat and looked to the side. Immediately after, to think for a second. "I'm here for you, though," he said as he returned his gaze down to Wyan once again. "I'll always be here for you. Now more than ever. You understand that, right?" Wyan sniffled as they stared at Blue's eyes, raising a hand gently wiped that tears that were already beginning to well up again. "Yes, yeah. I thank you, Blue. I'm sorry that you have to see me like this. I just don't know. I don't think I even got the chance to tell her that I appreciate her, you know? Now I'll never will," they mumble as they rested their head against his chest, sniffling once again. Blue was unresponsive for a moment, unsure what to say. He simply placed a hand upon the top of their head and carefully stroked their head, doing his best to be a source of comfort in this situation. Truth be told, he couldn't understand why his darling held any sort of sympathy for that witch of a woman. She was a leech, which was a generous way of describing her. A parasite that was sucking away Wyan's finances, and patient with every passing day, with every time she failed to pay her share of the rent. So why were they crying for her? Why in the world did she have going for her that could make Wyan mourn for her to this degree? Would they show the same amount of sorrow if he died? What if they didn't? The thought made his blood boil, but he had to bury his rage for right now. He had a chance to discuss the idea at some point. "Wyan, darling, I'm sure she knew that you appreciated her. She was your friend, right? So of course you knew, he mumbled softly, tilting his head to side as he gazed down at them. Do you think so, Blue? They asked as they looked up at him, once again, eyes wide with sorrow and the need for an answer. It was taking all his strength not to break right then and there. He was supposed to be comforting them right now, but with the way they were looking up at him, he couldn't help but think about kissing them right now, right then and there. The more rational side of him, the one begging for them to stop looking at him like that, was the side that managed to get him to speak again. I know so. And that was Snowed In. Always currently. If you want my content, please consider subscribing, subscribing if you haven't already, comment down below, and liking the video. I'll see you guys next time, and I will put the link to this in the description and in the pinned comments, and I'll see you guys next time.